E3 is one of the biggest weeks in gaming. And there was a lot of stuff that piqued my interest. But one of the things that I liked the most was just how awesome the flying looks in Anthem. Bioware knows that in Anthem, flying in your mechanical suit, called a Javelin, is something you are going to be doing a lot of. And they have made sure that that experience is full of great animation and awesome effects, so flying is a rewarding experience for the player. From blasting off to in-air acrobatics, effects while moving at speed, and little differences between the in-game classes, there is a lot to dig into. So let's break down the gameplay footage we saw at the end of the Anthem presentation at the EA E3 conference. We're going to break this video down into 3 categories that I'm going to be looking at. This launch into flying at full speed, which looks amazing, general flying, and some differences between the classes. Let's dig into it. Hey, my name is Giggity McD, and here on the channel we talk about the ins and outs of game design so that you are equipped to analyze, discuss, and create great games. Part 1. The launch. This is where the player transitions from whatever action they were doing into flying. It is characterized by this big explosion, and the player zipping off on their way. I imagine the player will be doing this quite a lot, so getting this action to feel good is important. It is built up of many components to give the player a raw, aggressive feeling of acceleration. The first thing we will look at is this big explosion from the rocket engine. It is big and bright and shaped like an open umbrella. As the player launches forward, it animates like an umbrella closing, becoming a long, thin flare from the engine. It's only a few frames long, but you feel it more than you see it at full speed. Accompanying this is this big orange flare. This flash is reminiscent of games that flash the screen white when the player takes damage, and, while not taking up the entire screen, it is big enough to have a similar effect. It complements the large explosion to give a moment where we lose the character in the launch, as well as a really obvious visual cue. At full speed we only see it briefly, but it adds a lot of impact to how aggressive this acceleration should feel. From the back of the Javelin we also see these red sparks, as well as a puff of black smoke as the engine engages. These elements are seen quite often, as per here in the jump and hover. They fold more detail into the action, offer world permanence as they linger after the launch, and help relate to the player's prior position. We also see that as the launch occurs, the screen shakes violently. Is industry standard these days for something that needs to convey weight, such as taking a massive hit or landing from a long fall. Or being lurched forward by a giant rocket strapped to your back. And it is so popular for one reason. It works. Look how heavy this feels. And finally, to really give the player a sense of speed, as the screen shakes violently, as soon as the engine engages, we get this intense blur effect that is applied to the surroundings. This effect eases up over a few seconds of flying, to give the illusion of a sudden increase in speed that the player gets used to. So let's think about all this together. We're in a heavy robotic suit with rockets strapped to our back. We jump in the air and engage these rockets at full thrust. You feel the engine ignite and go to full burn, and we are catapulted forward at pace. The world zips past as we become accustomed to the speed. The whole suit shakes for a moment as the engine calms to flying speed. I think this third-person angle conveys that fairly well, without me having to go and build a giant rocket suit for myself. Part 2. In flight. We're in the air now. What do? Well, for Bioware, this part is something the player will be doing a lot also, so it needs to feel good and be thematic too. There is still quite a bit of polish being added to the flying to make it feel good as well. This would likely need to feel somewhat effortless in Anthem, as you're playing as a capable mercenary, but it's flying by strapping rockets to your body for goodness sake, so it still needs to feel cool. As mentioned before, the blur effect from takeoff eases back once you have been flying at speed for a few seconds, but it doesn't ease back all the way. It still needs to feel like you are travelling pretty fast, because you kinda are, so it's still not tack sharp like on the ground. And also, as we transition out of the launch, the Javelin assumes the Saiyan position, hands back and by its sides. Remember, mercenaries would find flying something that they'd do a lot. This also allows for 2 things. The first thing is, it's easy to have these trails coming from the Javelin's hands. These I imagine are to look cool and help convey speed, but they may also be there to help the player perceive the angles of the turns they are making. They definitely add a nice subtle touch, and they are light sensitive, so they won't appear in the dark, but as you can see here, they appear when we get into the sun. The second thing about the Saiyan pose is that it's easier to see the jitter that is being animated onto the limbs when they are back. I think the jitter is one of the things that make the flying look as cool as it does. Keeping in mind there is a person inside that big mechanical suit, being propelled by rockets, I like the idea that it's shuddering and the pilot would need to resist against the air and the suit to keep their arms in position. It also adds movement to an animation that could have been fairly plain. This compounds when we look at the cool little adjustments to the legs and arms that are animated on as the player turns. It looks a little like skydiving and allows the pilots to lean into turns, but also seem like they need to balance the suit. This gets turned up to 10 in this barrel roll animation we see from the Ranger. Massive over rotation before regaining control. Looks amazing. We mentioned sparks before. We can see now sparks are coming from the rear of the engine randomly, just to add some more detail. It's just nice. It's just nice. We also have this awesome long blue lens flare. I really like this. It's a small visual touch, but it does a lot to sell the idea that the engine on your back is hot. That's a rocket, remember. And hot rockets go fast, and players like fast. I think it works particularly well on the smaller rockets like here on the Ranger, that would otherwise just be a small orange area. Since it overlaps part of the model, it really makes the heat seem to leak out into the world. Part 3. The other classes. We have been swooning over the Colossus most of the video. Let's have a quick look at the other classes. For the Ranger, most of the stuff still applies. Big explosion, red flash, jittery arms. The animations for the more nimble Ranger, when turning, are much more pronounced. This sells the nimbleness of the class compared to the Colossus, and we obviously see that in the barrel roll, which looks awesome, happy to say that twice. The other notable thing is the explosive acceleration of the Ranger that leaves the camera behind, and then the camera catches up. A little addition to the class that sells the giant burst of acceleration even more. I think this is a cheeky animation because the Ranger soars ahead and then more or less stops for a few frames as the camera catches up. But at speed, it looks fast, nimble, and best of all, it feels good. Tasty. You'll notice this doesn't happen with the Colossus. And finally we get the Storm. And I'm not even sure here. The paradigm for the Storm is completely different. We have this gaseous trail being left behind, which does look pretty dope. When it stops, there is a particle effect and animation. Electricity will ripple through the suit after certain actions, which I'm guessing is meant to convey this overwhelming latent force in the storm. And also when the storm is flying, it has this cool cloak rippling effect that's sort of like the jitter on the other two models. I really like how it sticks to the back as opposed to flapping around all over the place, and it has a very uniform type of waving to it. The Storm also has this cool teleport dodge ability. If we slowly go through this, we see this particle effect, big blue vignette from the edge of the screen to say the action has happened, and to sell the idea something cool and weighty is happening, a few frames of the Storm being invisible before another particle effect playing and the Storm reappears. So we can probably expect lots of energy and blue particles from this class. Part 4, Super Hidden Part, Summary. So, in summary, this looks dope, this looks dope, this looks dope, this looks dope. Not entirely sure here, but hey, still looks dope. And I hope you learned something. If you think more game design content should be part of your life, subscribing can do that for you, and I would really appreciate it. Smash that like button if you enjoy well-designed games, leave a comment telling me where I went wrong, and I will see you on Friday.